And I want to show you guys something. So if you click on the top right corner, this little drop down here, now we haven't given this mesh any textures yet, but by default we always have this checker pattern, and if we click it, this checker pattern will pop up on our mesh. And the reason for this checker pattern is for two reasons. The first one is so that we can see how many pixels each part is getting. So the smaller the checkers are, and I'm just going to press F4 here to hide the wireframe, the smaller the checkers are, the more resolution that particular part is getting. So our pommel here is very big on our UV map. Just the way we unwrapped it, we didn't really scale it down, and it's just really bigger than everything else. And it's a very small piece of the sword. So the checkers are extremely tiny. That means that this pommel is going to get tons and tons and tons of resolution. Now it's all going to change when we pack it all onto our texture space here, but this checker is a really good visualization of how much resolution each part is getting, so that we can scale things accordingly, so that we can dedicate the right amount of resolution for each part. Generally, we want our model to kind of have an even checker pattern, that all the checkers are roughly the same size, which means each part of our mesh is receiving roughly the same texel density, which is a really fancy word of saying texture resolution. So right now everything is all messed up, but that's okay, we haven't gotten to packing yet. The other reason why this checker pattern is helpful is because we can see where there is UV stretching. And we can see that by if the squares are indeed squares or if they're rectangles. So you'll notice on the grip that these squares are rectangles. That means this grip is receiving more resolution in one direction than it is in the other direction. In other words, the UVs are not proportional. So if we scale these UVs down really flat, we're going to get a lot of like stretching, it's called here, and the checkers are going to be very much like rectangles. And that's because this grip is receiving a whole lot more resolution in one direction than it is in the other. Our UV island is very squat here, which means that it won't be receiving very much information in this up and down direction. So generally we also want our squares to, or our checkers to be squares. So I'm just going to scale this until our checkers become squares. Scale it down a little. And there we go, that looks to be about square. So now this is the right proportion. Now let's try to pack everything onto our UV space here. We'll start with the blade, because that one's easy. We can only get this blade so big. We want a lot of texel density for the blade, but it's probably just not going to happen. Since the blade is so long, I mean, we could run it diagonally across our texture, and that would give it more texel density. However, that's going to make placing all of this other stuff a nightmare to try to fit in here like a puzzle. So it's really going to be best just to make it horizontally. We'll make it as long as we can. That'll just kind of be the end of that. We can't really do much else with this blade. Okay, now let's kind of try to get the grip onto here. And the pommel is way too big right now, so the pommel should not be this big. Maybe like that. And we can always look at our sword to see how much texel density things are getting, because we don't want anything to be getting too many pixels, especially if it's really small. So this pommel looks like it's getting a tiny bit more resolution than our grip, or about the same resolution, which is good. That means it's a good size. And this guard is getting quite a bit more resolution than our grip, and certainly a ton more resolution than our blade, but we can't really do much about that since the blade is so long. We can't really fit it onto our texture any other way. Let's try to fit these in here. Oh, and by the way, oh man, I forgot to tell you guys, been holding out on you. I have this select by element mode checked in my editor. If you don't have it checked, it's going to be kind of hard to select islands here. So this is really helpful when it comes to the packing stage, this little toggle select by element. And then all you need to do is marquee over a little portion and it'll select that whole stack of islands. Okay. You know what, let's see if we can get this grip a little bit bigger if we turn it the other way. So I think that'll probably work out better for us. And then we can just select this guard and rotate it. Now if you want to rotate something perfectly 90 degrees, you can hold control after you start rotating and it'll lock in increments of 5 degrees. And now that's not perfect, we do have some wasted space, But you know, it's always hard to get things perfect, and as long as you're using as much space as possible, then it's okay. It's okay to have a little bit of wasted pixels. We just can't avoid it. So the guard is still getting a little bit more texel density, but I mean, we could make them smaller to make it match, but it's not going to buy us any more space for anything else to make bigger. So why not just make them as big as they are? Because I mean, yeah, we could make them smaller, but we can't really make this any bigger because it'll run into this pommel stuff, and we can't scale it up like this because then it'll start to stretch. So this situation is probably going to be about as good as we're going to get. Maybe the pommel can be a little bit smaller here. So our texture is laid out now. And now what we have to do is get these UVs into Photoshop so we can actually see where we need to put all the features, where our textures need to go. Now, I'm going to show you guys how to export this template into Photoshop, but I'm not actually going to show you guys the texturing of it because this is not a Photoshop tutorial and it's not a texturing tutorial. So to export this to Photoshop, we simply right click here and say render UVW template, and then a little dialog will pop up asking us for the resolution and everything, and a couple other parameters here. The defaults are probably going to be fine. We can just say render UVW template, and our little render buffer will pop up with kind of like an image of our UVs. Then we can simply, this little disk in the top left corner of our render buffer, can click on that and save this thing where we want to. Call this Dagger UVs. And we save it in the format we want to. Generally, we want to save this in a format that's going to carry an alpha channel, such as PNG here. PNG is a good one. You just drop it into Photoshop and it'll already have transparency and everything for you. If you save it as a JPEG or something without an alpha channel, then all you're going to have is this image with the black in it. And it's going to be kind of hard to overlay this onto your texture and kind of work under it. So always try to save it as something with an alpha channel. I prefer PNG. So just save that. This is probably going to be fine. You want to make sure alpha channel is checked. And then you can just open that up in Photoshop and work right under it. And here is the texture that I came up with. It was kind of a quick one, and it's really not much. I didn't give it too much love here. But it does have the basics. The metals have kind of a brushed metal base with some light scratchies. And there is some general discoloration as we go towards the corners of things, and some general wear on most edges. Then of course we have the leather strips with some low contrast, high frequency noise for the leather, and each strip is kind of worn as it falls into the grooves there. And here is the whole kit and caboodle, textured and lit in a more flattering way. I'm sorry, I just had to get some reflections going. This dagger looked too weird without them. But anyhow, there you have it, a more complex object modeled and unwrapped for texturing. I hope learning occurred, and I hope it was fun, and I encourage you guys, if you are trying to learn the ropes of 3D, to make stuff, make anything. You can do studies of things sitting on your desk. They may not be the most interesting subjects, but it is a really good way to learn how to model. I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. If you enjoy this stuff so far, then this is probably the beginning of a long journey. Thanks for watching.